Hello everyone, this is SIG Scheduling Meeting, April 16. Let me share the agenda. Okay, so today we have Natasha wanted to talk about in-place pod resize preemption. Yeah, Natasha, you can go on.
Okay, cool. Could I get permission to share my screen so I can present the CAP?
Yes. Okay, you should be able to do so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for working late to host this meeting. I wanted to discuss this CAP I opened for scheduler preemption for in-place pod resize. So I brought the idea to the SIG maybe a couple months ago, but I have a actual CAP now. And then following the CAP, there's a specific issue that I want to talk about, but I'll first go over this. So as I think most people are aware, in-place pod resize reached GA in 135, which was a huge win for efficiency, but there's still a functional gap, which is that if there's not enough space on the node, the resize stays in a deferred status indefinitely, which is different from a new pod. When a new pod gets scheduled, it triggers preemption to make space. Resize request just sits there forever. So this CAP is trying to align the behavior to make deferred resizes trigger preemption in exactly the same way that new pods do. So I'll go over the proposal at a high level. I did see Mache left some comments on this, so this may change because I haven't had time to change it yet, but I'll go through it and then we can discuss open questions. So the current proposal is that when a pod gets into this deferred status, we will add it to the same scheduling queue as new pods. And then when we're processing it, skip the standard node search phase because it's already bound. Instead, directly treat it as a fit error. I saw Mache had a comment about it might be simpler to, instead of directly going to it being a fit error, go through the regular scheduling process, keeping it restricted to the node. That way, side effects such as populating state and stuff is already taken care of. So I agree with that suggestion. So this is probably going to change, just so folks are aware. But then after it's seen that the pod doesn't fit, this triggers the standard preemption logic. There's a small change needs to be made to the preemption logic to make sure that for deferred resizes, that one, it only looks for victim pods on the same node, and two, we want to make sure that the current resources aren't calculated twice. So we need to temporarily remove it from the node snapshot, do the preemption calculation, and then add it back.
Right, so preemption is currently also node local. So is there any concern?
So the concern is when it's when it's like calculating how much space it needs to make on the node itself. Because the current pod is already on the node, we don't want to count the current pod's resources. So the idea is
Yeah,
just
that, yeah,
temporarily remove it.
obviously. Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah, and
have
then
to
put it back. Um,
ignore them.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
then,
the preemption
oh,
process itself, I think, should work without uh, any significant changes. Of course, if we ignore the new development for workload aware preemption.
mhm. Yeah, I did open a POC for this and it's really small, maybe like 100 lines of code. So I don't
Hmm.
think we're introducing a lot of complexity. The next few sections are just talking about preemption policies. These should be the same as scheduling new pods. And then if preemption is not sufficient to make room, um, I suggest we have a new condition to surface that. We can decide on the name and the KEP, but the idea is to give this condition as a signal to users or potentially like external controllers, cluster autoscalers, that the resize is stuck due to capacity. And then the pod should move to the unschedulable queue and follow the standard back off retry logic. Um, so that's the proposal. Um, I would love SIG's feedback or like any open questions before I move on to the next bullet point. I'll pause here. Dominic?
Thank you. So I was about to get back into it and look into details. So sorry that it haven't happened
Mhm.
yet. But I remember when I was reading the proposal earlier, I think the question that I have left is what would happen if the pod is resized again with a different value? Uh, how I guess we should take it into consideration, but there is a small like space for race that we may put a status that preemption is not feasible, but in the meantime the value has changed. So is that something that we should address in the cap itself? How to avoid it?
Yeah, I can add something to the KEP about that. The scheduler could make that determination by checking the last transition time on the deferred condition. So maybe we can discuss details about how exactly
Hmm.
that works, but it might make sense, like if that happens, move it from the unschedulable queue back to the regular queue to try again.
Okay. So in other cases, like the pod which cannot scale up, it will go to the scheduling queue and it will like follow the regular process of to be reconsidered whenever the situation changes and like whenever scale up would become possible, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. So I listed some cases. I think this is already handled in scheduler
Hmm.
for the regular preemption case, but pod is deleted, pod is downsized, or node has changed. Then it can trigger the same retry logic.
Yes.
Machi?
Yeah, so because in cube scheduler, like we always keep the exact pod object in like one place, either the scheduler cache, scheduling cycle, or scheduling queue. Now with this proposal, the pod could be in two places, right?
Mhm.
It could be on the node info in the cache, but also in the scheduling queue.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, this requeuing process, so trying to put the pod back to the active queue based on some event, it may not be that simple because in in case of these hints that check, for example, if there is enough place on the node after the pod disappeared, they will base the decision with the fact that the pod is already on that node.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure so if you sum up all the resources that are taken on the node, you will count the pod itself as well because it's on the node, but we also want to schedule it. So we are like double counting a single pod. And this is one case, but there may be more cases in the scheduler that we are not aware of that may break when we have pod in two places at the same time.
But double counting should be addressed by the change itself. Do you mean that other plugins, for instance, the array made double counted, right?
Like even queuing hints, right, could double count the pod.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have cases when we want to update the pod object, we need to update it in the cache and in the scheduling queue. We now don't handle such cases, right? We only update the pod in one place, so we would need to change the event handlers as well. So this may
Yeah,
be a
and
larger problem.
that's true. And other plugins also like need to be, especially the array plugin, I guess, also needs to be aware of it.
So
But
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please finish.
no. I mean the preemption does not support the array as well, so it's like not that big problem, I guess.
I'm aware that when we update, we'll need to update it in more than one place. And I'm aware of a couple places where we need to avoid double counting, but I might need help enumerating like every such case. I think it might be helpful to see if we can define some sort of helper so that if other components need to be made aware that it's in more than one place, it can be easier for them. But I don't know off the top of my head every single situation where this could occur, so I'll need some help figuring that out.
So I think the rescheduling process is something that rescheduling, or we don't have to call it rescheduling, but it is a special case. Like we only can fit into a place when a pod is running, but I think there is a similar discussion in the preemption proposal, and yeah, we have retrieval and rescheduling, those two possible actions, how to put back the victim pods. Wojtek, do you maybe have some thoughts about whether this rescheduling process will be eventually also useful in preemption, or you think the retrieval will correctly handle putting back nodes?
I think at least short to medium term, I believe in retrieval myself. Eventually, yes. Eventually, we want like. I believe that rescheduling eventually will be needed, but I'm not sure I can foresee the future of that
Sure,
far
but if
into
we
the future.
solve, let's say, the problems that we need to solve here, I think it will be like ready, or the same. It will be solving the same problem for, I guess, other cases.
You mean solving like which problems for rescheduling here, or?
Yeah. So
like in general, rescheduling is complex, right? So
yeah, but this
I
is a
would rather...
special case of rescheduling, and I probably shouldn't call it rescheduling, but something bit differently, to not confuse with finding a completely new space for a pod. But so, for instance, if we preempt a workload that has min count and a bigger number of pods than min count, then to actually check whether this workload can still remain in its place, we probably need to have this kind of what I prefer to call rescheduling, to check whether it can still be scheduled with a smaller number of pods in the place when it was running.
Yeah, but I strongly believe that what you are describing is actually a mechanism that is much richer than what we need here. At least that's my intuition, but I would say here you just need a way to find a way to trigger like preemption outside of the place that we normally trigger it, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some like consistent way that.
Yeah, so it will like go through the same scheduling process like Maciek said and suggested, and I think that would be no big difference between the two. But yeah, we need to think about all those details and consequences to avoid running into double counting. Philip?
Yeah, a bit high level question, but have you considered like different resize scenarios? Like there could be like different urgency or priority for the resize compared to just like scheduling the original pod.
We've thought about it. So the kubelet has a notion of resize priority that is very slightly different from scheduling priority, but it's so much simpler on the scheduler side to just keep them in the same queue and like
minor quirks to address. But yeah.
Again, it comes back and says it can't.
Yeah, we could not hear that.
I was like, it's so much simpler to keep it in the same scheduling queue and the same priority as like scheduling new pods, that it feels not worth it to diverge. And I don't think that precludes us from changing it later if some use case comes up.
I mean, like have you seen like some practical use cases that like, could show us like if it makes sense to, yeah, like well, one of the solution could be just to use this kubelet or priority or have another like value or field that would set such priority.
We've thought about it, but we haven't received a concrete like feature request or use case yet. If you have one, like I'm interested to hear about it. But today the kubelet, it first, like when it's evaluating resize priority, it does so first by priority class, then by QoS class, then by the amount of time the resize has been deferred. So there's nothing like crazy going on there. So unless we want to change that, I think keeping it aligned with scheduler priority for scheduler preemption makes sense. If you have a specific use case in mind, I'd love to hear more about like what exactly you're trying to do with like prioritized resizes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the flow of operations, so I don't have like a concrete use case. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other comments?
Sorry, I was a little unclear. Where did we land on the double counting discussion? Is it just that we need to think about all the places it could happen and then handle them as we think about them?
Yes, so I think that 100 lines of code won't be enough to fully solve this cap, right? It will require more changes. Like we need to be aware of them. So because now it's hard to even come up with all cases that can break when we have put into places. So maybe it's the best to like update the POC with this approach and see if it
Okay.
works or not.
Sounds good. I'll do that. And I'll update if it does work, I'll update the cap and let you know. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Probably not. So thank
Okay.
you.
In that case, I had a second bullet point related to this, so I'll try to be quick. I know I've taken a lot of time. But following that cap, I wanted to bring up in like a little more detail a specific issue that we have, which is that when we're implementing this like resize preemption, we have a use case where we actually want the ability to enable or disable it on a per node basis. So our use case is that we have some nodes in the system that are themselves resizable, and they are currently reacting to deferred resizes by upsizing the node. And in these cases, preemption is just disruptive. We don't get any benefits from it. And what we would like to be able to do is disable preemption until the node itself is no longer resizable, and then like be able to re-enable it. So I've put down some ideas for like an API. The one I'm recommending is annotations, but if people have different opinions, we can discuss more. But first, before I dive into more details, I want to see like, does anyone have any general questions or feelings about this idea?
So the preemption process would have to be aware that a node itself can potentially scale.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to know that it can scale. It just has to know that the node does not want preemption.
Yeah, I think it's effectively opt out for preemption, right?
Yeah, so like setting an annotation like disable IPPR preemption or like something like that is the idea.
But is it only for the resize or for scheduling as well?
So that's what I have here. So we want it only for resize because we have some mixed clusters, like some nodes are resizable, some are not. And so if we set it for scheduling as well, then when scheduler tries to preempt for scheduling, it would just choose a pod on a non-resizable node. Like it's not really a benefit there. So we want it only for resize. I do have an open question if we add this, do we also need to add a similar toggle for scheduling, or can we just keep it to resize and add it to this cap?
Yeah. So what are the proposals on your lists? I guess in all of them, the preemption process need to be somehow aware of those node annotations, node labels, node fields, separate object, and node condition.
It is also much simpler if we limit it to resize, because preemption for resize is limited to a single node. So all it has to do is check that one node, and if it's disabled, it's just to stop.
Okay.
Do we need to make the scheduler aware of this situation? Like, cannot the like kubelet annotate the pod with an information that the pod is like try to be resized, but the node doesn't support that, so the scheduler shouldn't even care about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
if
that was
the
exactly
scheduler takes the pod, it's that it won't do anything, right?
yeah, that was exactly the question that I wanted to ask too. Like, can we distinguish that on the per pod level with like a different condition for one of those, like scheduler would be reacting and for the other it won't?
So not set deferred state, but something different?
Something else, yes. Yeah.
On a per pod level.
Because the kubelet then effectively has the knowledge if it like or
yeah, I need to think about that. I think if we do that, we still need this. Like, for example, if we pick an annotation, because the idea is the cluster operator, or like when the node is like first created by the cluster admin, they'd need to set this annotation. I don't think the kubelet itself has intrinsic knowledge right now whether the node is resizable or not. So what we need to do is introduce this annotation, and then the kubelet, when it sets its condition, that's what reads the field and sets the condition accordingly, and then the scheduler would have to react to it. So it's, to me, it feels like the same thing with an extra step, but I don't know.
I think we then can avoid exposing this, like right? Because like we can make it a kubelet configuration setting, for example, and then we don't need to expose it on the like API side.
Oh, you mean like a flag to the kubelet?
Yeah, or like config field,
so
config API field. Yeah.
In that case, it would be like static configuration, right? You can't change it.
Is it changeable?
We would like it to be so. For example, if the resizable node hits capacity, we then want to be able to change it and get the benefit of preemption.
Yeah, but I guess, in my opinion, it's still like worth doing that, right? Because that's clear separation of like API surface here, and
yeah, I would like to limit.
Doesn't need to be aware of like how kubelet decides, or like whether this feature is enabled on the node or not, right? It's basically only interested in pods.
Yes, it's effectively one single entry point to the scheduler.
Yeah.
Like, all the information is coming with the pod, and like the pod itself allows us to decide like if we should react on that or not.
I understand your suggestion. I think I will have to discuss it with SIG node to see how would they want to expose it if we want to go that route. So let me just. I'm just writing this down in my notes. Okay, I'll take this to SIG node and see what they say. If we do change the pod condition, then yeah, all the scheduler has to do is read the deferred condition and then make a decision whether it will try preemption or not. I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. So coming back to the agenda, I wanted to briefly think about how we should approach the triaging process for issues, PRs. So what would be useful to get out of this process is to have a clear list of issues that, for instance, we should consider for the next release, to see how big the review queue is, and to be able to apply priorities to those issues. So I haven't done any research yet, but do you have any experience how other SIGs are dealing and managing triaging? So one, of course, the approach that I was thinking of is to putting labels for the target release on PRs, issues, enhancements, and of course, then we have the visibility of things that we are indeed targeting for a specific release, or we defer and put backlog label instead of the release. But maybe there is a better way of doing that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like we can add new value to the related milestone, which is bag up, so we know that the issue is like we are aware of such issue, but we are not like planning it for the incoming release. Because now we don't know whether this is the issue that we are not planning or we haven't even looked at it, right?
Right. So we also have quite a long list of issues and PRs, which probably not all of them have been triaged. So I guess we can also annotate them and let's say go at some point through them, or only apply the process to the new issues.
Yeah, I don't
Right,
have
there
an
are
opinion
even
here, but just like a generic hint is that we could try asking some other SIGs, right? We are not the only SIG. So, for example, Matthew Shree, SIG apps, or maybe someone from SIG Autoscaling, and see what they are doing and whether it would work for us or not. So,
yeah, that was also one of the things that I wanted to do, just haven't done yet.
Yeah, but as far as I know, our dashboard is like the largest, like so other SIGs have like limited dashboards. Ours is pretty unique among them.
Yeah, maybe also because we haven't did much cleanup and then the point. On the other hand, the issues themselves disappear after 90 days, so they should eventually clean themselves.
But not all of them, because you can froze the issue,
Yeah.
and we have plenty of them. some issues from like, I don't know, 2020 or something.
Yeah, we still should have some backlog of things that we don't want to target the next release, but we don't want to like completely ignore, close. So probably, yeah. Okay, we will, I think we will try to come up with something that works. So I think that's it. So the next point is about SIG autoscaling integration. Paweł?
Yeah, so this is a quick information. This is something I already like informed on Slack. Basically, the SIG autoscaling a team is launching a regular meeting to discuss the potential options for the integration of autoscalers with Kube Scheduler. The first organizational meeting was held this Tuesday, and the plan is to have those meetings on a regular basis next weeks. So if you are interested, please join the meeting. I've posted the meeting link to get the calendar invite. I think you need to join SIG autoscaling group.
Okay, I joined it today. So the next meeting should be?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Yeah, I don't see it. Maybe maybe it's something more that we need to do. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for heads up. Okay, do you want to discuss anything else? If not, then thank you, everyone, and have a good day and evening.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
bye.